Relax. This is about me as much as it is about you, so don't get defensive and just listen. If you go on my Letterboxd, you will see my top 4 favorite movies include When Harry Met Sally, Thelma and Louise, The Graduate, and V for Vendetta. Though some people like to switch out their top 4 depending on their mood or color aesthetic, these really are my top 4 favorite movies. And all of them are about white people. White people falling in love, white people finding their freedom, white people not knowing where their lives are going, white people starting a revolution. And while that's all fine and dandy, and I love these movies to pieces, as a first-generation Hispanic woman who champions racial diversity and representation in film, I have to ask myself, why are all my favorite movies centered around white people? Why are all my favorite movies centered around people who don't look like me? In a Vice article by Kimberly Lawson titled Why Seeing Yourself Represented on Screen is So Important, she discusses the work of Carlos Cortez, a historian who wrote a novel titled The Children Are Watching: How the Media Teach About Diversity. In his novel, he uses an article from 1987 to discuss representation. During an episode of the game show The 25,000 Pyramid, he wrote, "Two contestants linked the word gangs with East LA, and this was because of mass media and how it delivers messages of racial bias." Lawson goes on to say, when the only portrayals audiences see of minority characters are negative, those portrayals transcend to public image, and the media influence not only how others view them, but even how they view themselves. People like to pride themselves on supporting representation and diversity in the media, and I am one of those people. But we cannot simply share a billion images about what is going on right now with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the Black Lives Matter movement, pointing a finger at everyone else and not point a finger at ourselves. Not acknowledge where in our lives we are lacking in uplifting or just listening to Black voices, specifically in cinema. Because at the end of the day, I cannot sit here and say I want to make films that provide representation for Latina women while simultaneously suppressing or ignoring Black women who are just trying to do the same thing. Now, this video isn't to condemn you or make you feel like shit for liking movies with white characters. This is about the sense of guilt as a person of color when you look at your wall of movie posters and they predominantly feature white actors, or the movies were made by white directors and writers. And yes, we should take accountability for not exposing ourselves to Black cinema, but we cannot ignore the bigger issue here. Not everyone is a film nerd with Mubi, the Criterion Channel, or other independent streaming services that provide older or more obscure films. Most people sit down and simply receive and watch what Hollywood gives them. And what does Hollywood give them in relation to Black stories? Hollywood cinema is a tricky medium to utilize in learning about the Black experience because it is such a corrupt industry that makes one film about slavery every 6 months and calls that representation. And if it's not slavery, it's a white savior, or a magical Negro, or a civil rights activist, or criminals. And even when these films that are exclusively about racism or police brutality or gang activity are done right and are stories we need to hear, it's really the only stories we're getting. This is where television fills in the gaps, and the reason why shows like Insecure are so critically acclaimed, because they inhabit a space that allows Black people to see themselves as they truly are in their current environment, as opposed to, slaves. As my friend Kayla put it, TV has always been the silent savior of Black stories, especially in the 90s with shows like Living Single, Martin, Girlfriends, Moesha, or Sister Sister, which never received much critical acclaim outside of the Black community. The fact of the matter is, popular cinema does not provide us with a very wide spectrum of Black stories. In the 1970s, Blaxploitation films allowed Black people to see themselves in a cinematic space at the forefront of a film created by Black people. This was an important genre move for solidarity and representation. These stories often included the Black man's plight against the establishment, the man, white people. However, the main characters in these films were typically criminals or pimps, and backlash included calling these characters stereotypical. In Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman, Patrice, the president of the Black Student Union, engages in a conversation with the main character Ron about Blaxploitation cinema. She says, "That was a Black exploitation movie, a fantasy. Real life's not like that. In real life, there's no Cleopatra Jones or coffee." So once again, we, along with Black people, face this moral dilemma of what Black cinema should look like. Moving on from that, in the 80s, Black people and their stories began to populate the genre of comedy, with actors like Eddie Murphy pioneering this genre. And this was fantastic as it supplied humor for the Black audience that wasn't exclusively from a white perspective. But again, this didn't give Black stories the opportunity to achieve emotional depth in their filmmaking like white movies did. And again, the go-to emotional depth for a Black story was slavery or segregation, and nothing that concerned the times of the present. Now let's take a look behind the camera. If you ask the average white moviegoer, or just not black moviegoer, to name some black filmmakers, their go-to will most obviously be Spike Lee, because of his proactive and confrontational work on black romance and police brutality. Maybe they'll mention the important works of John Singleton as he portrayed the inner-city struggle of black people and gang activity. Maybe they'll tell you Ava DuVernay, Lena Waithe, Dee Reese, or Jordan Peele, and okay, cool. The only problem with this is, if you Google search Ava DuVernay movies, the earliest one is from 2008. For Lena Waithe, it's 2014, for Dee Reese, it's 2011, and for Jordan Peele, it's 2016-2017. Therein lies the gap of black cinema, somewhere between Do the Right Thing and Get Out. And who is here to fill this gap but the one and only Tyler Perry? And though Perry's films portrayed the black family in entertainment and once again allowed for representation, his work hasn't necessarily aged well, as many people have spoken out against his films and his lack of employment of black writers. So, aside from the yearly Tyler Perry movie, either Hollywood wasn't letting black-made films have their spotlight besides Spike Lee, and even then he wasn't even getting enough attention, until the 2010s, or they were and today's audiences don't seek them out. They just stick with the names most popular today. So really, it's a double-edged sword. As an audience member, we need to realize where our system is failing us, and acknowledge that Hollywood lacks in giving us the stories we should be seeing. However, as an audience member, we need to realize where we fail ourselves and our black peers, and acknowledge that we also have a responsibility to expose ourselves to black cinema. It is not the duty of black people to hand you a to-do list of movies to watch, though many people have been sharing that recently. It is not the duty of black people to provide you a step-by-step guideline to being a better champion of diversity. We must take accountability and do that ourselves. So yes, while I can't control what movies happen to change my life, I can control what movies I allow into my life and expose myself to. And the fact of the matter is, I am not watching enough films made by black people or about black people, and you probably aren't either. My main point is, we cannot assign art meaning in our lives and hold it to such a high standard and then not engage with its social commentary or meaning. Because how can we ever truly understand a person's experience without even exposing ourselves to it through the mediums we allow ourselves to most deeply connect with? I will leave you with the words of film and television critic Carl Broughton II from his article about black cinema in 2019. Black storytelling and Black Lives Matter are one and the same. Black storytelling has been my people's way of showing us that Black lives matter for hundreds of years, as the origin of Black storytelling was to preserve our culture and traditions and to remind us of how far we have come. But 2019 was a special year for Black storytelling in the form of Black cinema and television, as storytellers grappled with the complexity of what it means to portray Black lives on screen and how that portrayal can change the narrative of how Black people are viewed in society. I want to finish this video with a big shout out to my beautiful friend Kayla, one of the smartest women I know. She doesn't like pictures of herself sometimes, so I'm not going to risk it by putting one up, so here is just a message that she sent me, and it's probably one of my favorites she's ever sent. As a black woman, she helped me with this video and continuously shows her support for my videos while giving me feedback and a perspective I will never have. I love you, Kayla. Thank you endlessly. In my bio of this video, I will have links to resources for signing petitions or videos that you can donate by just watching the ads, and other resources that are related to Black cinema that were written by Black creators and writers. Thank you guys for watching.